No, senor, you will not find anybody in Permanco. You see everyone in Permanco very busy. Oh, dear me. I'm terribly sorry. The Citroen DS, possibly one of the most important cars of the 20th century. But is it any good? Should you care? Let's find out, shall we? DS, on y va!
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart. And we're together when we're together, something big is happening among us. It's not as if we don't have to deal with our shortcomings. It's not as if we don't have to wipe away the tears from time to time.
So welcome to another episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. This is a 1964 Citroen DS19, which was actually built in South Africa. It's owned by Jim, whose extensive collection of cars we've covered many times on my channel already. So thanks, Jim. Before we get into more detail about the amazing history of the DS, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'm also very, very happy to be joined once again by Mr. Bill from the Fuel Power channel, who's helping me record this video today so it doesn't look terrible. So the DS is one of these cars. It's not really a car, it's more like a sort of institution, this thing. It's a sort of icon of French engineering, and it had a very, very long production life. It was first launched in 1955 at the Paris Motor Show, and on the very first day they'd actually taken over 12,000 orders, which is absolutely bonkers. Think about the number of people who could afford cars, and these were not cheap when they were new. This is really more like an executive car than a family car, and the level of engineering that went into this is just mad. It was designed principally by two people. The engineer was a gentleman by the name of André Lefebvre, and the designer was Flaminio Bertoni, not Bertone, Bertoni. And they came up with this amazing shape that is instantly recognisable as a Citroen, and it also looks very, very French. We've also got some really weird quirks in this car. For example, if I want to turn right, I flick that little button in the middle of the dash. We've got no synchro mesh on first, so we have to stop like that if we actually want to come to a stop and don't try to use second. And the gearbox, well, it's it's not even where you'd think it is, it's actually on this column. The handbrake I'm not going to use because it's very difficult to reach it with your seatbelt on. And in this car we've got fixed seatbelts, and I do not like fixed seatbelts, viewers. I do not like those in the slightest. So we're out of the junction, thank goodness. So yeah, no synchro mesh on first, column change. A lot of the early cars were with the semi-automatic transmission. This is a manual. Weirdly, you'd think that Citroen would have kept things quite sort of consistent in terms of the engineering of the car, but from 1957 there was a model called the ED as opposed to DS. They're both kind of in jokes because DS means goddess in French and ED means idea, and that was a lot more basic than this. So we had, normal brakes and much less in the way of kind of luxury options, no power steering or anything like that. Very lucky that this South African built model, which dates from '64, actually has power steering, because I gather it would be a nightmare if it didn't have that. This engine develops to standard about 83 horsepower. The E-Days, which shared the same 1.9 litre engine, only had 69 horsepower. The DS, when it was originally launched, came with 75 horsepower, but that was upped in 1961 to 83. This car actually has a little bit more than that, it's about 90. in 1965 there was another model which was it was introduced that was called the DS21. At the same time, the name of this car was not changed to the DS20, which is unusual because it actually then gained a 2-litre engine, which is odd. But the DS21 and 19A. The brakes take a bit of getting used to. They are really powerful. They remind me much more of a modern car. We're actually coming to a complete stop here. We've only got to turn left in the rest of this road test, so that's good. We put it back into first. The clutch is really high as well. It's bonkers. So yeah, we have the original DS and the DS19 which had a 2-litre engine. The DS21 had a 2.2-litre engine, which came in about 1965 with 106 horsepower. And then the most powerful one, which came in right at the end, about 1972 I think it was the DS23 that had an engine displacing just over 2.3 litres with either 115 or 130 horsepower. Now, I've heard actually that if you go for the SAE figure, it's even more, by 140 horsepower. The injection ones are the most powerful. This engine's actually based on the pre-war Taxi Avant. It's a bit rough. It's not exactly what I would associate with a car that has sort of these really sort of space-age looks, having this old-fashioned engine which derives something from the 30s. But I think they either ran out of time or ran out of money or something like that, and that's why we got this thing. It is, yeah, it reminds me of a 30s car. The biggest problem with driving this, it's not the gearbox, it's not the brakes, it's actually the accelerator. The accelerator is at a completely different height from the clutch, and it's really, really low. And last time I drove this, I kept slipping off the accelerator, but the shoes I was wearing were the lovely Chelsea boots, as worn by people like Patrick McNee and the Avengers, and my foot just kept slipping off the accelerator pedal. So it is a little bit difficult to get used to driving this. You also don't drive this with a straight wheel. The steering wheel's supposed to be about, I don't know, like a quarter turn to the right when you're going straight, so you can hook your thumb in it, which is very weird. It's also a huge steering wheel with a very thin rim. The other thing which is weird is the mirror is not up here, it's down here. There's just one driver's side mirror, which is fascinating. Other variants of the DS were the Safari or Break, which came in 1958, and then the lovely Citroen Cabriolet, which came in 1960. The Citroens are worth an awful lot of money these days. The E-Days, because they're a lot more simple, are probably the cheapest way into DS ownership, and from 1955 until 1966 you could actually buy one of these in this country built in Slough. They had a model just below the normal DS called the DW, which was with the same engine but without some of the kind of more luxurious features. It's a hard between an E-Day and a DS. The most radical thing actually in some ways with the car was this sort of later versions with the second facelift in 1967. Those have the swivelling quad headlamps which actually turn with the wheel, and those are pretty crazy actually. Jim, who owns this car, prefers the look of this sort of first facelift one, which was introduced in 1962. It's very minor though. A lot of people can't even sort of spot the fact that this is in any way different from those earlier ones, but I think actually these sort of mid-period ones do look a little bit better. The ride is really, really good. It's not a sports car, this is by any means, and you'll see, in media when these appear, the angles that they kind of lean over at are pretty alarming. But they did win a lot of rallies. They were used on things like the Monte Carlo Rally, which I find utterly bonkers, but I'm not really the biggest Citroen expert. I do have French family, but my grandfather's cousin, who was from Normandy, he always drove Renault, so you know that's the sort of heritage that we have. But some people absolutely love these. If I can actually find a gear, there we go, that'll do. And you know, going on the bumps, it's as if they're not really there. There are multiple positions for the suspension to sit at. You can go right to the bottom, or you can go right at the top and make it look like an off-roader. It's bizarre, really. You've got to be very careful though when driving these, but you just get used to all these random quirks that they have. I've had a lesson in this before, and I'm glad when Jim said you're going to need a driving lesson in this before you actually do the review, because he was absolutely right. We had to sort of plan the route very carefully, so I didn't have to think about where we were going, and also made sure we only had that one right turn, because I can't really cope with any more than that view. It's just a bit too much for me. So there's lots of appearances in media of these, as you'd kind of expect. Got things like Day of the Jackal, where a very famous event that took place in August 1962, when a terrorist tried to kill Charles de Gaulle in his DS, and despite shooting out 2 of the tyres, he was able to escape, and he credited the car for saving his life, because you can drive this on 3 wheels. There is a video from Ian Seabrook's Hubnut channel from a few years ago, where you actually see him demonstrating the car on just 3 wheels, and also the fact that you can drive this car, you know, almost naked by taking off body panels because of the, you know, base unit structure that these cars have, and they're just bonkers. They're very charming, but I would say they're really me. I mean, I would prefer something a little bit more conventional, so I don't have to think about absolutely everything that I'm doing when I'm driving it, which is either amusing or frustrating depending on your point of view. Other sort of appearances in the media would be something like an episode of The Baron in 1966 called Something for a Rainy Day, where it's supposed to be in France, and hence Steve Forrest is driving one of these cars. But he gets in chase of a Mark II Jaguar that falls off a cliff. And again, you know, acres and acres of body roll. Also, there's one of these in the 1991 film Voyager, which was an adaptation of a German novel from 1957 called Homo Faber, and you know, there's a character who actually drives the DS for many miles through Europe. So it's set in 57, obviously made in 91, and you know, it's a very appropriate car for him to have because he's an engineer, I think. And then in an episode of The Saint in 1967, I think that was filmed, called To Kill a Saint. There's 2 of these used. One's in the studio in Britain, and one's actually in Paris, a yellow one and a cream one. They're just sort of part of the fabric of life. And strangely, Citroen, they didn't have a model between this and the 2CV for many years. You could argue that it was things like the VME were sort of meant to sit in that gap, but VME's fall closer to a 2CV than this. So until the GS came in 1970, your choices were a bit limited in that way. Fortunately, Michelin, who owned Citroen from, I think, 1934 to 1974, they kind of bankrolled the introduction of this car and used it to showcase for things like the radial tyres, which were a very kind of advanced technology for the mid-50s, and also this crazy suspension and the inboard disc brakes. So not really just a car, an icon of both France and just engineering in general, and I'm very grateful to have been offered the chance to drive this.
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart, and we're together when we're together.
Well, Mr. Bill and I are alive. What a victory. Anyway, let's have a look at the DS's more practical side and take a look at the boot. There are 2 things you're aware of immediately with the DS. One is this crazy rear styling with the indicators up here, like something out of a Dan Dare comic. And also the fact that since we've turned the engine off, the whole rear of the car is sunk right down, which is completely normal, but make sure you don't get your foot trapped under there. That might be bad. Boot is surprisingly normal. It opens like this. It's quite big. There's no spare wheel under here. The spare actually lives under the bonnet because the engine is so far back. One thing you'll notice as well on here is these little places for putting a tool to remove the rear wing. You think, well, why would you want to do that? If you look at the side of the car, you'll also notice that the spats cover the wheels so much that you can't actually get the tyres off or the wheels off unless you remove the wing. And actually a lot of owners, if you're looking at buying one of these, will gladly do that for you because it shows that the base unit on which all these panels sit is in very, very good condition. One thing I've just found in the boot is this workshop manual for the pre-1967 E-Day and DS. Obviously a lot of garages would think you've got this kind of weird hydrodynamic suspension with either LHV or LHS fluid in it before 1967. After that, the more familiar LHM, and they probably run a mile. It's strange to think actually these cars were built over here, and in South Africa they were built up until 1974, which is great. They seem to quite like them over there. One really surprising thing about this car, considering the market it was aimed at, it wasn't cheap, and the size of it is the rear headroom is not very good. Legroom is fantastic, and we've got a couple of ashtrays in which to put discarded G-ton. I don't know how tall Charles de Gaulle was, but as we referred to earlier, he used to like these cars very much, and apparently they saved his life, so you know, it's obviously a good thing. The interior in this car is actually out of a later car. It's out of a DS21, and it's very comfortable. We have this nice armrest here. Manual windows, of course. The floor is sort of seems quite high up for some reason. I don't quite know why, but yeah, if you can ignore the fact that my head's here, maybe I slouch a bit. That's better. But yeah, it's pretty nice in here. You could obviously fit 3 people, I think, on shorter journeys. It's very pleasant. One of the ways that you can tell this is no normal car is just by looking at this interior. It is totally bonkers. We've got such a flat floor in here that you can put your shoes down here that you can use when you don't have to drive this car. This is the pair of shoes I was wearing last time, and my foot kept slipping off the accelerator pedal, so we will put those down there because we can't use them while driving. We've got some other ones here. So this car has got a normal manual in it. It's not the semi-automatic that a lot of the earlier cars were, like the E-Day 4-speed manual with no stick compression on first. It takes a while to get used to that, but also these are the indicators, and they don't have an indicator light at all. Jim's actually put in 2 indicator lights of his own. One doesn't work at the moment, and they're quite useful because you just can't see from this little switch here what's going on. You can't see it. We've also got dash light switch here. The key goes in the middle, and that's the starter button there. Next to it is the windscreen wiper. The washer is here. That's the interior light. The choke lever is that one, and the parking lights are right away over this side. This dash is not wood, it's painted. This has actually been painted because the South Africans found that these cars have left outside for a couple of years. The wood on the dash would just lift off, so someone actually painted this by hand, which is remarkable, isn't it? Fresh air ventilation is this lever here. That is open, that is closed, which is crazy. Then we've got little flap here to direct the air if you want it. Other controls for the heater and the defroster of there. We've got another big ashtray in here because it's France, it's the 1960s, and we need to have somewhere to put the G-tan. The glove box is surprisingly small. I don't think these secret mission documents are going in here at all. In fact, I know they're not. We've got this Radiomobile period radio here, a big compartment here to put stuff in because there are no door pockets in this car whatsoever. The speakers actually for the radio are 2 at the front here, and there's 1 on the back parcel shelf. The handbrake is this thing here, and then the pedals, they're weird. The reason my foot kept slipping off the accelerator is because it's a very thin sliver of metal on the right hand side of this sort of mushroom brake button thing, and the clutch is really, really high in this car. You would have seen me earlier on struggling to sort of keep it balanced on that incline when we're turning right. Overall, it's completely weird, and the facelifted cars from 67 onwards were a lot more conventional than this. Mind you, the later dashes are not exactly conventional, but just a bit more conventional than this, so you actually get a sort of little stalk for the indicators as opposed to being reached down here. Also a bit weird are these lights, so we've got off, Ville, route, and then the main beam is that, and you just do reverse to turn them off. Can't remember what 0 stands for, I just fixed it off. Because this is a South African car, we've got a dash in kilometres per hour and no rev counter, which you know, can be a bit alarming, but the engine is so loud that if you look under the bonnet of the car, Jim has put some extra insulation in so that it sort of drowns out the noise, because it does get a bit noisy. It's not the nicest sounding engine that I've ever driven in a car either. Now, we haven't got time today to demonstrate taking off the panels and driving on three wheels, things like that. You can watch Ian Seabrook's video to do with that if you want to see a DS and that sort of way, but we can demonstrate the suspension. So let's turn the car on. So we're on, okay. So we're in position 2. We'll go to the bottom position first, which is like a mode if you, I don't know, want to get right at the bottom. So we're sinking right there. Normal position 2, which is where you'd start off. Now, before you drive off, you do have to wait about 25 seconds for the car to raise itself up to proper height so you can go on the road. You can hear that the pump is actually working. But if you want a little bit more height, you can go to position 3, which is this one here, which will raise the car up for some rough road driving. If that isn't high enough for you, you can go to 4, which is right at the top. And then you basically have a Land Rover. See, the car's really going up quite high now. But you wouldn't want to drive like this very high, it wouldn't make much sense. So to normal, which is that one, position 2. You see it going right down. And then if I turn the ignition off, the back will sink all the way. And there we go. In conclusion then, what do I think of a Citroen DS? Well, this is one of the most important pieces of 20th century design, and I respect this car enormously. It's also very, very interesting, but it is quite tricky to drive, so just bear that in mind before you rush off and buy one. Oh, dear me, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Well, it's all part of the service, sir. Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and we'll see you again soon for more tweed suited action.
Here we are and we're together, even if we are apart, and we're together when we're together. Something big is happening.